I believe that the Divine Mother is standing about 11 inches, very, very close to every single human being on the earth. And when the Divine Mother actually gets the attention of that human being, what she does is to manifest a huge mirror. A mirror in which that human being can glimpse, if he or she dares, the truth of this devastating and amazing moment in history. And when the Divine Mother has your attention, the first thing that she will do, I have found, is turn that burning mirror to the right. And as that mirror turns to the right, what will happen is that mirror will turn dark, will turn molten with boiling darkness. And out of that boiling darkness will appear the seven-headed beast of this apocalyptic catastrophe that is now menacing all the human race and all of nature. And the reason why she turns that mirror to reveal this seven-headed beast of apocalypse is because she knows that every human being now must wake up to what is really happening on this earth, to be really useful in this tremendous transformation in which everything that we are is at stake.
I think that what first attracted me to the Divine Feminine was the fact that I was born in India, and that in India, God as Mother is worshipped everywhere. I had a very deep and profound relationship with my own mother and my grandmother, and from very early on I think I identified as a person with feminine power, feminine grace, feminine passion. When I was 25, I had a kind of breakdown. I was a professor at Oxford and became totally disillusioned with the academic life, and I went back to India. And there I met the work of the great mystic philosopher Aurobindo, who spoke of God the Mother as the great evolutionary force of history. And one day when I was 25, by his tomb, kneeling in meditation, I saw the Andromeda Nebula spinning before me, and I heard the words, "I am the Mother. Everything was begun in ecstasy, everything is sustained in ecstasy, everything is ended in ecstasy." And that began an enormous journey into the motherhood of God, a journey which is unfolding and unfolding and unfolding, and I'm sure will never end.
The first head of this great beast is population explosion. An explosion of human population that by 2050 could take us to having 9 billion people on this earth, which is 3 billion people more than most conservative experts agree the earth can comfortably sustain. What this means is that we are headed for wars on simple resources like water. What this means is that many, if not most, of our other agendas of transformation are simply drowned in this extreme fact of us having infinitely more people on this world than we can nourish, feed, or house. And when you consider that now there are on this planet over 2,000 million people who are living in the most degraded and destroyed conditions on less than $1.50 a day, in appalling lack and appalling need, then you can only begin to imagine what will happen when what is already a catastrophe continues to explode and explode and explode and explode. The second head of this beast of apocalypse is the environmental holocaust that you and I are now living in. I hope that everyone in this room is aware that the news from the experts on the climate is not only serious and terrible, but getting worse every single month. Global warming isn't only happening, it is actually going faster than many of the most grave prophets of the 70s, 80s, and 90s ever imagined. And what we are looking at is an infinitely degraded environment which could very well ensure our extinction. By 2050, if current rates of exploitation of the Amazon continue, the Amazon rainforest will almost totally be destroyed, which means, in simple physical facts, that the lungs of the world will be gone. All of the oceans are horribly polluted. 120 species of animals and insects vanish into the night every single month. And all of this would not be so ultimately shocking were it not for the fact that there is absolutely no serious, concerted, political, economic, social effort on behalf of the transformation of this disaster into possibility. Turn and look into the eyes of the third head of the seven-headed beast of the apocalypse, and see in those eyes the terrible danger of fundamentalism to this world. At the very moment when humanity needs to be totally united beyond dogma of any kind, beyond division of any kind, beyond any kind of response except one of absolute need to be one in the face of an overwhelming catastrophe that threatens our whole nature and the whole of nature. At that moment, what you are seeing is the retreat of all the major religions into a fundamentalism that makes catastrophe almost certain. It isn't just Islam that is fostering insane terrorism. Look at what is happening in the Christian right in this country. Look at how the power of the Christian right, the power of a totally false, totally hysterical, totally negative version of the Christ consciousness, look at the power that that is having on our government and on its policies and on the foreign policy of this country that is now spreading war like a plague of cholera over the world. This fundamentalism isn't only occurring in Islam and Christianity, it's also in certain aspects of Buddhism and in Hinduism and in Judaism. In fact, all of the major religions of the world are responding in certain degree to the chaos of this crisis by retreating into dogmas that divide and mutilate and separate. And this would be terrifying anyway, But it's more terrifying when you consider that the three religions of the book, the religions of Islam and Christianity and Judaism, all have a version of Armageddon that centers on Jerusalem, that centers on Israel, that centers on the crisis in the Middle East, which is simply the most critical crisis in the world, the most potentially explosive crisis in the world. And each of their different versions of Armageddon make almost certain that a great conflagration will take place in the Middle East, with, of course, the full power of nuclear and biological weapons behind it. And the Divine Mother is the mother of all nations, all beings, all sexualities, all animals, all sentient beings. And that fundamental and glorious unity, that truth, is being totally shattered at the moment when only that truth of our fundamental unity in divine nature, in the divine motherhood of God, only that truth can save us. And now, turn without fear to look into the eyes of the fourth head of the seven-headed beast of the Apocalypse, and see that what that fourth head is the unprecedented spread of weapons of mass destruction. Evil has always been able to wreak unimaginable havoc in the world. There have always been crazy, destructive, and evil people with evil forces behind them that have been able to cause tremendous damage and tremendous pain. But it is very important that everybody now understands one very frightening thing, which is that while the evil in human nature may not have changed, the availability of weapons to enact that evil has taken a quantum leap. And you have only to imagine what Hitler would have done with the full resources of the mass media, with biological weapons, with nuclear weapons, and with a full armory of horrific minor weapons, had he had them at his disposal to imagine what is now possible to those forces of darkness that want this experiment in transformation ended. And now turn without fear and without illusion and without denial to the fifth head. And what this fifth head will show you, if you dare to look into its eyes, is that through our obsession with technology, through our fantastical obsession with the ingenuity of science, through our hubristic passion for gizmos and for phenomenal technologies that reflect far more deeply, very often, our pride and our desire to dominate than our desire to unite and construct, through these, we have made of this world a cement garden in which at the very moment we need to be connected to nature on every level, on a cellular level, we find ourselves never more separate from her. We live in cement walls on which flash messages from 1 million computers, and we live in a chaotic, oversaturated with information world in which our natural instincts of communion with nature, that nature that our dissociation is threatening on every level, in which this natural communion that belongs to us as divine human beings is being steadily eroded at the very moment when we need it like oxygen for our survival. And now, without illusion or denial or fear, standing and sitting in the depths of your divine nature, turn to look at the sixth head of the beast of the Apocalypse. And what you'll see when you really look into this sixth head, what you'll see is the corrupting and polluting and deracinating and denaturing influence of a vast conglomerate of mass medias that now, at the very moment when we need information about what is really happening and guidance at the highest and deepest level, at this very moment when the whole of nature is crying out and the whole of humanity is in extreme danger, is in fact pouring into our minds and into our drawing rooms avalanches of trash, pornography, violence, and a horrible celebration through a proliferation of reality shows of precisely those values of demented individualism and corrupt competition that are threatening our entire adventure. Take in the depths of your hearts what it means to live in a world where the media are controlled largely by right-wing magnates and mass corporations intent on destroying the environment for their own use, and in which it is increasingly difficult, even for those of us who live in a democracy, to get authentic information about what is really happening and what is really going on in the government and in the various policies of the government. And now, without illusion, and without denial, and without hysteria, turn to the seven head of the seven-headed beast. And what you will see when you stare into the eyes of that beast's head, that head, what you will see is that all of our lives have become infected by what I call a hysterical busyness. An extraordinary universal ADD, which makes it almost impossible for us to concentrate on the peace and the truth and the depth of our divine nature. All of us are multitasking beyond imagination. All of us are living in a world that is driven by a hectic and crazy need always to be doing, an empty energy that gets crazier as the situation becomes more disastrous. And this hectic busyness is a disaster for the simple and profound reason that you will only be able to connect with the depths and the peace and the radiance and the joy and the power of your divine nature if you slow down and calm down and breathe and listen and let the hysteria of the false self dissolve and let the peaceful radiance and wisdom of the divine self emerge. And you don't have to be a veteran of conspiracy theories to realize that there is a very deep invested interest in keeping people hysterical and moving from false goal to false goal and consumerist and obsessed with power and money and status at the moment when all kinds of dark forces are taking over the world to mutilate and destroy the adventure. Because as long as people are kept hysterically busy and anxious and hectic, they will never discover that in them and in us lives this column of calm fire that is the divine presence, that is the divine power, that is the divine peace, that is the divine joy. And so never become empowered enough to rise grandly and say, enough, this craziness, this lunacy, this obscenity, this blasphemy must end.
I think the dark night of the soul is a mystery of the mother, and that when it comes to someone, this dark passage through suffering and stripping and burning and searing, what they meet is the mother, and what they meet is her mercy and kindness and gentleness that enfolds them and protects them as they go through this passage. And when I came to this passage myself, I met Mary in a way that I had never met her before. I met her in miracles. There was a wonderful day in which a photograph of her just leaked rose water onto my desk, and it was a miracle, and the heart in the photograph smelt of her rose for months and months and months. I met her in the smell of her rose in my house. I met her in light. I met her in visions. I met her in words of great comfort and protection that helped me endure what I had to endure. And I know now that that is what happens in the dark night. On the one hand, you're put through a very severe process in which the false self dies, and on the other hand, you have the enormous and transforming grace of coming to know the Mother, coming to know Mary in an intimate and tender and direct and miraculous way that totally changes your understanding both of the Mother and of God and of yourself.
And so the Mother has turned the mirror, and the mirror has gone dark, and the beast has appeared, and we've had the courage together in her presence, calmly, without fear, without illusion, without denial, to turn and look at each of those 7 heads. So now, calmly, just imagine what a disaster this apocalypse is when you imagine that it fuses a hectic, crazy busyness which divorces us from our real selves, with a mass media that is addicted to pornography, violence, trash, and misinformation, and sucking up to power at the moment when we need reality like oxygen, to a technological obsession that has created a cement garden of the entire planet at the moment when we need to be connected, to a proliferation of weapons of mass destruction which ensure that the evil have unprecedented powers of destruction at their behest and at their control, to a growth of fundamentalism that is dividing and tearing apart the heart of the world at the very moment when it needs to be united in love and in sacred passion and in a tremendous hunger to save the planet before it is destroyed, to an environmental apocalypse that we're doing absolutely nothing serious about at the very moment when the worst kind of information is coming in, to a population explosion that is ensuring that wars on simple resources are about to break up all over the world. And when you fuse all of them together, and you dare to sit in her presence and with her grace and experience them all together, then what happens to you, if you let that happen to you, is that she takes a spear of gold and she drives that spear right through all of your illusions and agendas, all of your fantasies, and all of those desires in you to keep separate from others, and your heart explodes in a massive heartbreak that will never be healed except by the divine transformation. But if I thought that that was all that the divine is revealing to us at this time, and all that this miracle mirror is going to show us about this time, Kitty and I would have prepared the most capacious bowl of James Jones Kool-Aid. And I would now suggest that you and I just went out and drank copiously of it and came back and sang Kumbaya one last time, or We Shall Overcome, and just lie in each other's arms here and wait for it to be over. But I hope you noticed something about what I've been saying and how I've been saying it. I am not frightened, and I am not in despair.
The man that I've loved most in my life and who was my spiritual father was a man called Father Bede Griffiths, whom I met in South India the year before he died when he was 86. And he was the person who really guided me through the mystery of the dark night by telling me one wonderful morning about how the dark night had come to him. He suffered a heart attack and was totally felled by it. And in that heart attack, lost control of his rational mind, but found that his being was invaded by a love more intense than he had ever experienced. And although he had to go through a great deal of physical and mental suffering during that period, he come to feel that period as the great grace of his life, because it had actually enabled him to go to a wholly new dimension of understanding of life. In the dark night, there is very often both great psychological, emotional, and physical suffering. And I think the reason for this is that the person who goes through the dark night has to lose all the normal supports, all the normal securities, all the normal comforts which we rely on. And I think that the reason for that is that you're taken by the dark night to a moment when you have to surrender totally to God, surrender totally to the mystery. This is, of course, a hard process and very difficult to endure. But the more you understand the deep reason behind it, that you're being stripped of what is false only to be clothed in what is real, the more easily you will surrender, even to physical suffering, and the more easily you'll be able to offer up that physical suffering as an act of sacrifice to the world.
So when the Virgin, the Mother, has your attention, and I think she does have your attention after the seven-headed beast of the Apocalypse, what she does is to look into your eyes, I found, and just allow you to shake and tremble. Because every human being must shake and tremble at this moment. Shake and tremble in a kind of sacred fear and in an awe, both of the destruction of one's own shadow and the destruction of the divine power. But when she has seen that you've been truly humbled and truly awoken by what you've seen in that dark mirror, what I have found that she does, and this is such an extraordinary grace and such an extraordinary blessing, and it changes your whole life and your whole vision of what is happening in this time. What she then does is to smile her smile of triumph, her smile of the lioness and the tigress, the one who has overcome, the one who has birthed the divine humanity. And in that smile, and with that smile, she turns the mirror. And the mirror that was molten and dark becomes utterly radiant and gold. And in it appears 7 astounding and miraculous stars. The 7 stars of the birth of divine humanity, of that divine humanity that even as we speak, in the middle and through this apocalypse, is being born in the most astonishing, mysterious ways all over this planet. One of the great secrets of being a mystical activist is, I believe, that while we must gaze into the black mirror, while we must recognize those 7 heads, while we must stop being in denial, we also must not continue staring into the abyss of that darkness, because as Nietzsche said, if you go on staring into the abyss of the darkness, the abyss stares back into you and you become one with it, and it drains you of all your resolution and energy and joy and power. So this is why she makes you see that dark mirror first, and then gets you to the place where you're vulnerable and humble enough to be able to receive the astounding message of the real truth of this apocalypse, which is that it is not only a chaotic destruction, but it is a birth canal on a stupendous scale of a wholly new way of being and doing and loving everything, which is now, as we speak, being manifested. You have to be humble before you can receive the fullness of that grace. You have to have trembled in fear and desolation before you can receive the full amazement of the full plan of God for humanity. You have to have been stripped of your illusions about your own pride and about your own activity and about your own powers before in humility you can stand in wonder before the powers that God will give you if only you give your whole life to God.
And what I want to do now is to go calmly through each star, so that each star can shine its radiance into your heart, and so that you can grow full of hope and full of strength and full of passion and full of resolve to become someone who really wants to work to be a midwife of the great birth that is now breaking out everywhere. So let me start with the first great star. The first great star in the radiant golden mirror of the Mother. That star is the crisis itself. That star is this apocalyptic crisis that menaces us all, that challenges us all, that compels us all really to look at the shadow of humanity, that forces us all and will force us all more and more to strip away our false illusions and false agendas and start finding what is most human and most divine in us and start working from that deep, deep truth to create a new world. So the very depth of the crisis, the very extent of the crisis, the very terror of the crisis is actually a terrifying grace, an enormous, immense grace, which is destined to transform the heart of humanity and to bring hundreds of thousands, even millions of people into a wholly new relationship with each other, with nature, and with God. And the reason why I can say this with such certainty is that I have studied for many, many decades now the truths of the great mystical systems. And I have discovered that one theme that is consistent in all the serious mystical systems is the theme of a great death, a crucifixion, that leads to an unimaginable resurrection. This is in the heart of Christianity, this is in the heart of Sufism. You can find variations on this in Taoism, in Mahayana Buddhism. And this great secret, the secret of the wisdom of the dark night of the soul that leads to a birth of a new kind of consciousness, this secret is what is now being enacted on a massive scale in history as the entire human race goes through a dark night of the species, which is not final destruction, which is not final annihilation only, but a deep call to strip away everything that prevents humanity now from loving itself and loving nature and entering into a dynamic and fecund, recreative, cooperative relationship with God to create the divine kingdom here on earth.
So let us look at the second great star of the birth. And one of the things that you'll find when you gaze into the golden mirror is that many of the powers that seem negative in the black mirror actually have a golden lining. Wholly new ways of fueling our lives. Wholly new sources of fuel at the very moment when our addiction to fossil fuels is threatening the future of the planet. Hydrogen fuel, solar power, wind power, all of these different ways of furnishing energy at a moment when we need new energy. That's being given to us. It's being opened up to us. And all we lack at present is the political will to transform our structures enough to be able to bring these new miraculous and clean sources of fuel into operation. Isn't that amazing? We're not being abandoned in this crisis. Rays of the Mother's great wisdom are touching the brains of scientists and biologists and ecologists all over the planet, and they are offering all kinds of very powerful, very luminous new solutions on every level. We must listen and we must act. The wisdom is being given to us. So that's the second star, and rejoice that it's there. And look at the third star now. And see that the mass media, which has been, and we all know how guilty the mass media is of perversion and pornography and violence and trash and celebrity trivia and reality shows that celebrate competitiveness and cruelty at the moment when we need all the other. We know that, we felt that, we've registered that. But look at one central astonishing fact that makes possible all kinds of new unions and communions. Look at the birth of the internet in these last 15 years, at the very moment when the crisis itself is escalating, at the very moment when the right-wing media is trying to extinguish and control thought, and at the very moment when the corporations who own that media are trying to unify the whole world in the Coca-Cola, at that very moment, the internet is being given as a divine possibility to exchange information under the radar of the governments and the corporations, and to provide ways for people of goodwill of all kinds and from all societies to get together in humble, living, grassroots protest. Isn't that amazing? And anybody who's been watching the birth of this birth knows that the signs are very powerful for all kinds of mass movements gathered together by the internet, by people of goodwill, with authentic information. The signs that those mass movements are now possible at the moment when they'll be most needed are all real. Think what Howard Dean achieved. Think what was achieved by those 20 million people who were gathered together by the internet to protest against the Iraq war. Think of what could be achieved as the crisis darkens by hundreds and thousands and millions of people being gathered together in loving and centered protest against all the rubbish and madness that is coming through. And think that in the internet we have an example of the Mother's all-embracing consciousness and all-embracing interconnectedness that could really help us beyond imagining at this time. The fourth star is something that has been happening in this room since we've begun, and that is happening on a massive and amazing scale throughout the known world. And that very simply is that in the last 20 years, we have had nothing less than a mystical revolution in which all of the treasures of all of the mystical systems have been made available to humanity at the very moment when humanity was threatened by total meaningless, by total despair. The treasures of the mystical systems were translated into all the known languages and were given to a humanity starved of meaning to show humanity that it was divine. It is divine. It is as if the Mother is standing before every single one of us and saying, do you want the divine revelation? Do you want to know that you're divine at this moment in history? Do you want to be infused by divine grace and divine power and divine passion? Well, what about Hinduism? You don't like Hinduism? I understand. Too many gods. Okay, fine. You want Buddhism? You like Buddhism? You like Buddhism? Yes, maybe you like Buddhism. Oh, no, too boring. Sitting, too boring. I get it. Taoism. What about Taoism? Would Taoism be good for you? Yin, yang, that's nice. You don't like Taoism. Too Chinese. Christianity. Perhaps it's Christianity that could illuminate you. Christianity, very good. Christ, wonderful. Mary, wonderful. You don't like Christianity? Don't like the... Okay. What about yoga? Yoga, you don't have to believe anything. You just experience in your own body the energies of the peace. You don't want to move? You don't want to move? I understand. Meditation. What about meditation? Meditation is nice. You said vegetarian diet, that's good. You don't want meditation, you don't want yoga, you don't want Taoism, you don't want religion, nothing. Vegetarian diet, you could taste. Do you see what I'm saying? She has, out of her boundless mercy, just poured out all of her wealth to all of humanity, so nobody has the slightest excuse anymore to wake up, because anybody can wake up in terms of their authentic temperament through any of the revelations that all lead to her, if they only have the guts and the passion to just say, help me, open me, instruct me. Do you get it? This is a phenomenal and unprecedented revolution. The fifth great star is the star of a way through that she has shown really works in extreme situations. And that way through is the way through of strong, radiant, compassionate non-violence. The Mother has shown us throughout the 20th century, through the lives of people like Gandhi and Rosa Parks and Nelson Mandela and the Dalai Lama and the people who founded Solidarność in Poland, she has shown us, through the life of Martin Luther King, that if a being is brave enough and centered in God deeply enough, really to claim the full power of their divine nature and the full power of divine compassion and the full power of divine wisdom and intelligence, then that being receives directly from the divine an extraordinary blessing upon what they do, and that blessing over time matures into a quite astounding change in the circumstances that they are trying to transform. In other words, that violence and that cruelty and that demonization and that hatred, the old way, the way of the dark-headed beast, that way will not win in the end, however powerful it may seem. Because there is another way, which has been shown to win in historical circumstances, to the ending of the British Empire, to the prevention of a bloodbath in America between the races, to an ending of apartheid and the bringing in of a regime of forgiveness, to the growth of Solidarność in Eastern Europe. This way has been shown not merely to be beautiful and not merely to be holy, but to be real and to work. And to be real and to work when people who are brave enough to pursue it really plunge into it and stake their whole lives on it, and are prepared to risk, like Nelson Mandela risked being in prison for 28 years, to hold to the truth of its radiance. And this is the star of the return of the divine feminine to humanity in all its power and beauty and majesty and outrage and sacred passion and absolutely forensic critique of all forms of power and absolute no-nonsense humble vision of interconnectedness on every level. The mother that for 2,000 years is being kept in the dark cellar of the patriarchy with duct tape over her mouth and her perfect fragile hands bound by ropes of despair behind her back and her body sealed off in its magnificence in horrible robes of darkness. That mother is coming up from the cellar with the duct tape over it, speaking the truths of the divine feminine. Her hands are being freed and her body in its sensual and erotic glory is radiating the truths of the divine marriage of heaven and earth for all those beings who can see it. And that glory is coming back. It's coming back to our psyches and our minds and our practices and our technologies. It's coming back in theology and in new kinds of mysticism that are trying to get over the old addiction to transcendence and trying to bring in the wisdom of a unity of opposites of heaven and earth, body and soul, heart and mind, masculine and feminine, sexuality and worship. Do you think that the beings who awoke to quantum physics weren't illuminated by the mother's understanding of interdependence? Of course they were. So in science and all the different levels of science, she is bringing this new wisdom of interconnectedness to bear. Do you see? Do you see that in yoga, in the growth of yoga, what she's bringing in is a new vision of the holiness of our bodies and of how those bodies can become supple and flexible and luminous and delicate and dancing, and how we can stop hating our bodies and end the Judeo-Christian fantasy about the separation of the body and soul and start experiencing the unity of body and soul in her luminous presence of divine passion and love. Yoga is helping us do that. Tantric love is helping us do that. So through all of these different ways, in all of these skills, in all of these sciences, in all of these technologies, in all of these mystical shifts, she is seeping and in. She's coming in. She's coming in to heal us, to help us what? To help us embody the light. To help us bring it down into science, art, ecology, industry, business, medicine, sexuality, and into our bodies. So the great birth that she is pregnant with, the birth of a humanity that embodies divinity on earth, that incarnates divinity on earth in all its powers, skills, energies, can now take place. And that takes me to the seventh star. And when you see and know and feel and taste this seventh star, and when you know just how real it is, your whole vision of this apocalypse will change, because you will know something that is the other half of the supreme secret of the first star. The supreme secret of the first star is that the apocalypse is the birth canal of the divine humanity, a crucifixion that's preparing a resurrection, an appalling stripping that is preparing our adornment by the robes of light of a divine love that will empower us to change everything. And the seventh star is the other side of that secret. And it can be stated very simply. And when you really get it, and when you really let it come in, it really opens you in enormous joy to the possibilities of what could happen now. And that secret is this: that God really does have an agenda. God is not watching this seated in the lotus position as some kind of amazing Steven Spielberg film, saying, oh, another continent gone, another animal race destroyed. How fascinating, because it's all my play, all my illusion. That is a sick and psychotic version of the God that I know. Because the God that I know is right here with us, in us, suffering with us, and in every living thing, and from within the depths of us, urging us onward with every kind of grace and every kind of calm and every kind of peace and every kind of passion to incarnate our divine natures more and more and more, because that God is involved in the depths of the process of evolution, involved in the depths of the process of history, is that process in all of its forms, and is dreaming a new world in and through us, and is pouring down on the world at this moment a torrent of revelation, of grace, of energy, and of power to help us incarnate that dream in an end to the reign of the seven-headed beast, and in the inauguration of the age of passionate enlightenment, the age of the birth of divine humanity. And that God is not watching that as a film, but God is Godding us in us, Godding us into the resurrection of us through our annihilation of the false self. And that secret changes everything when you really grasp the lunacy, the love, the outrageousness, the splendor of it, because it teaches you one very, very simple thing that gives you courage. And what is that very simple thing that gives you courage? gives you chutzpah, actually, more than courage, makes you able to be a radioactive nuisance, whatever you want to be. That secret is this. And it's something that I know, and it's something that I've experienced 100 times. It is that if you are mad enough to believe this, and if you are brave enough to open up, and if you are wild enough to let the divine energies come in, and if you are lucid enough to work with them in humility, and if you are courageous enough to go out into the core of the inferno of the world and to stand there without demonization and without judgment and without cruelty, but stand there and say, this must stop, and I am going to offer my life to doing something to cease this, to see that it stops. If you're courageous enough to do that, then you will discover that the secret of God's involvement in history manifests as an extraordinary protection of you. An extraordinary protection that gives you extraordinary hope in total darkness, extraordinary joy in total despair, and extraordinary strength in the middle of gnashing and wailing and collapsing worlds. And I know that at the very core of our DNA, that dream was seeded in the beginning. And I know that humanity's whole progress has been and will be to the moment in which it will be ready to die into the cost of actually building that dream. And I know that the apocalypse is our destined burning ground and our destined dancing ground for the making of that dream into reality.
I think that the role of Mary in the birth of Christ consciousness is absolutely crucial and the supreme secret of Christian mysticism. I think the supreme secret is this. Just as Miriam the woman gave birth to Joshua the child, the man-child, in time, so the cosmic Mary gives birth to the Christ consciousness in eternity. They are two halves of the same event, and Mary and Jesus came together as part of a mystery of the Father-Mother giving birth to the new sacred androgyne Christ consciousness on the earth. And this great secret of Mary being absolutely central to the birth of the inner Christ is a secret that has been known in the depths of the Christian mystical tradition. It was known by Bernard of Clairvaux. It was celebrated by Dante in the Divina Commedia, because right at the end of the Divina Commedia, it is the Virgin that Dante sees in a moment of absolute miraculous beauty. And it is the Virgin who gives him the final vision of the universe as being totally pervaded and moved by love. And the greatest of all the Marian mystics, who is also the favorite mystic of the Pope, is a man called Louis-Marie Grignon de Montfort. And he wrote in the 18th century, and he said something which I think goes to the core of our time. He said that when the Mother returns in her full glory, when the Divine Mary is known in her full splendor, then at last the birth of the Christ consciousness will be possible on earth. And I believe that the deepest meaning of our apocalypse is that the full Mother is returning in it to give birth to the full Christ. And Mary, the full Mother, is absolutely at the core of this enormous transformation.
So just bear with me a little bit more. Take all of those 7 stars into the depths of your heart in the presence of the one who is birthing the new humanity, the great Queen of heaven and earth. And I hope as you're absorbing both sides of the mirror together, you're realizing that they come together. You're realizing that there is a union of opposites happening, which is actually the most propitious thing that could happen. And that the price of the alchemy of the human into the divine is precisely that union of opposites on every level, of darkness and light, destruction and creation, masculine and feminine, mother and father, sexuality and worship. Everything is being brought by the crucible of the crisis into a potential fusion that can give birth to a wholly new level of power on every level. But before we do that, I'd like just to answer very simply and practically the question which must be everybody's minds: how do you become, in a practical down-home way, a midwife of this birth, a mystical activist, someone who is capable of fusing deep mystical passion and understanding of this vast birth that's taking place in this vast earth with your real practical duties in the world? We have to be very down-home now, and we have to be very real and very authentic to be real servants of this transformation. So I'm going to give you a very down-home picture. Mother Hubbard herself could not give you a more down-home picture. In fact, it was Mother Hubbard that taught it to me. Stretch out your hands and you see you have 5 fingers with which to grasp the world. And those 5 fingers are the 5 forms of sacred service that all those who want to become midwives of this birth need to fuse and combine in the core of their ordinary lives. The first service is service to the Father Mother, to the divine. Because through serving God in thanksgiving and praise and honor and adoration, you make a space in yourself for God to pour into you infinite awareness and infinite knowledge and infinite power. That first service is crucial. The second service is service to yourself as an instrument of God. Imagine that you are a flute, which God, the divine musician, wants to play the most holy imaginable music on. If the stops of that flute are filled with mud, or the flute surface is allowed to be abraded, the fullness of the music cannot pass through. And if you do not treat your instrument, the body, with tremendous reverence, and if you do not exercise and diet balancedly and bring to your whole understanding of your life a real intelligence of balance, then you cannot serve this great transformation because you'll be too weak. You must be strong. You must be balanced. You must be grounded in reality to be able to contain the divine energies, to embody them, and to go on tirelessly radiating them. So you're not serving yourself in the Sonoma County me kind of way. You're serving yourself as the incarnation of the divine spirit with reverence, holiness, and respect. That's the second kind of service. The third kind of service is serving all the beings in your life, all the beings in your family, all the animals in your family, all the beings that you meet in the course of your day, all the beings in your world of work, all the beings that you come into communion with, serving them really as divine beings, serving them with respect, serving them with compassion, serving them with profound commitment to recognize in them the presence of the divine at all moments. And you'll find that if you do that service, a light will go on in your life, and you'll recognize that the tired old woman serving at Safeway is the Virgin of Guadalupe. You'll recognize that the young man breakdancing on the side of the street with sweat streaming down his face is the Christ. You'll recognize that the old drunk laughing in the gutter is an emanation of the Buddha of compassion. You'll recognize that God is appearing in all these distressing disguises all the time, and that you are in a divine world with divine beings. And that will change everything, because that will give birth to a great love that wants to flow out towards all beings. The fourth kind of service is real practical service to the community you are in. Think globally, but act locally. In every community, all of the major problems of the world, sexual, environmental, economic, social, whatever they are reflected. You can't solve all the problems, but you can devote your energies to a problem that really breaks your heart. And if you do devote your energies to a problem that really breaks your heart, you'll find that being heartbroken will give you energy to go on and on serving. So really sit down tonight at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're thinking on all of this, and meditate on what really breaks your heart about this world at this moment. Is it animals? Is it the young people dying of AIDS with no home? Is it the environment? Is it the way in which the poor are so brutally treated and have no... Is it the lack of medical insurance? Whatever it is, find out what makes your heart bleed, and then make a living commitment to do something about it really in your community by devoting real time and real resources. And you'll find that if you do, your lives will become full of the meaning of the mother's presence. You'll know what it means to be helpful and useful, and that will change everything. And fifthly, the last service, the fifth service, is the service to the global community as a global citizen. And that really means choosing the kind of car that does not pollute the environment, investing your money in ways and in companies that are not addicted to power, and not using sweatshops, and not depending upon the helplessness of the poor to make them rich. That really means looking at all of the decisions of your life and wondering whether they truly serve the birth, or whether they're keeping alive the reign of the seven-headed beast. And that means becoming conscious at every level of how, as an American especially, everything that you do as member of the most powerful empire of the world has an extraordinary reverberation which you must now become responsible for. And if you combine the service to the world as a global citizen, conscious of all of your choices and acting with dignity and reverence to life in all of those choices, with a commitment to doing something real in your community with your real resources and real time to a real cause that breaks your heart and continues to break your heart, with a reverence towards all the people you meet and all the people you encounter as divine beings, with a service to yourself as a divine instrument, and constantly keeping yourself aligned through meditation and through exercise and through all balanced forms of diet and energy with the divine, with service to God through thanksgiving, adoration and praise. If you fuse all those kinds of service, you will, I swear to you, be born in the dimension of the divine human, and you will increasingly feel your life burn with meaning, burn with strength, burn with joy, and burn with sacred passion. All blessings and all hail to the Queen of Heaven and Earth. Thank you very much.